I'm going to review the interface in Rhino. I'm working in Rhino 8. I'm on a PC. So between a PC and a Mac, it'll vary slightly, but it'll be very close how the tools work. So I'm just going to set things up to get us ready for our first set of tutorials on how to build things. So it's not going to encompass everything that's involved. It's just to be a starting point. So when you open Rhino, I forget how the startup interface is laid out. But I think in most cases, when you open it, you'll have these four viewports that come up first. It'll be a top, front, or right, and then a perspective drawing. And you can work in all of these different windows. So when you start building in one of the window in the top view, it'll come up in all these other views all at the same time. So some people find that very beneficial. I prefer to work in one viewport at a time. And then I just toggle back and forth in the different views to see how everything's going to work out. So there's many ways to do that. So let's say I'm going to start with perspective over here. So I'm going to just click up here on the top where it says perspective. And if I just say maximize, it will make that, it'll fill the window with just that viewport and the other ones will go away. I can switch back and forth down here at the bottom. In most situations, this will be set up. They'll have perspective, top, front, and right. So all you have to do is click on these in here and it'll go to those different positions when you're ready to work in them. Another way to do that is to go up here to set view up at the top in this gray bar. And if you go in here, they have this red little car where they show the front, side, back, left, right, and bottom. So you can click on those also, and then that will change the view depending on where you want to work. So that's another way of setting that up. Another thing to work on at first is just navigating through the window here. So I'm using this Logitech mouse, which I had recommended everybody use. You can, if you have a mouse that works really well for you, that's perfectly fine. I like the way this controller works. It's got a trackball and a wheel and a left and right button. And you can combine that with some of the quick keys on the keyboard to get it to work. So I am just rolling the ball, which makes the cursor go around. So if I do right click and then roll the ball. I get to rotate around like this, and I can move in the viewport this way. If I do right click and hold shift, and I use the tracker ball, I can move this way and pan, kind of go up and down without rotating and moving side to side. So those are the two options that you'll have in the perspective area to maneuver. Now you can go in and out with the wheel. There's a little wheel on here. So if I rotate in, it goes in and goes back out again. So some of these commands work for the other views. So if I go to the front view and I right click and I'm rolling around. So there is no panning and rotating. So it's just basically moving. So that would be it. Right click and then you move the ball around. And then of course we can go in and out with the wheel. So that'll take a little practice. Once you get that down, you'll be able to navigate very easily throughout all the different views. So I'm just going to click on the perspective view, and it's going to go back into that view. The panels. So the panels are these interactive areas here, these drop down menus. So if you go up to Window, you click on Window, and then they have panels. So all of these options will come up. The ones that are important right now for our first set of tutorials would be properties and layers. So make sure those are checked. If other things are checked, they'll be in the window. I'm not sure what the setup, what the startup setup is. They might have other things in there. So try not to worry about those at this point, but properties and layers I'm going to talk about initially as we get started in that. So if you click on those, they will be set up here. So this is the layers here. It's like a little layer cake up here at the top, and it's called layers. And I'm going to give you this Rhino file. You'll have all of these layers will be set up already. They're going to have some exercises in there for the different tutorials that we're going to talk about. So right now, we're just going to stay in this first window at the top, just for this review of the interface. The next one down here that you'll see, if you select those two, would be properties. It's like this colorful circle. And when you select an object, it'll tell you these different parts, the characteristics of that. And I'll show you how to use that immediately to check our geometry. So panels, you got those, layers and properties. Now toolbars are in this gray area right here, all the way across. There are a lot of them. I'm not sure what's there when it first comes in, but we're going to select some of these that are important to start with. So if I hover over in the gray area here and just right click, This toolbar will come up and we have all these options to select in here. So to start with, you could select some of the, I'll leave this up for a minute so you can take a look at that. So we have C-planes, I have curve drawing, curve tools, display is okay. Let's see, what else do I have selected right now? Render tools, we'll talk about that a little bit today. Selection tools are good. Set view, solid creation, solid tools, those are good. Surface creation, surface sidebar. I'm going to work with that a little bit. So make sure you click on surface sidebar and then viewport layout. Okay, that would be good for now. But you can just remember, as you're working and you want to bring up something into the toolbar area, you can do that by just right-clicking into that part there. So I have Surface Sidebar selected. So what I want to do is I'm going to take that. I can click on that and use that, but I'm going to bring that over here because I'm going to use that quite often. It has some of the standard tools that we're going to use all the time. So I am going to select Surface Sidebar. I'm just going to drag that down here. I'll put it here for a second so we can take a look at it. And here are all those tools that are in that part. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to move that and just put that over here in this space. So those are going to be very handy and ready to use. That's one way I like to work. Right above that, we're going to have our on snap designations here. So we need to make sure that that's in there also. So if you go back to Window and we go to, I believe, is it Panels? Yeah, go to Panels. Down at the bottom here, it has on snap. So I have that selected. So if I click on that, they'll go away and the sidebar will come up. But we want to have those handy because we use those quite a bit. So I'm just going to go back to Window, Panels, down to the bottom and select on snap. So that's end, near, point, mid, and center. And I'll talk about how you use those because that directly correlates with this tool down here called on snap. So if you have those handy and you have a surface sidebar handy, then we're ready to go. And we have our layers and our properties, and we can start trying to build some things here. You can select tools like we have down here. You can have the move tool and the trim and all that. You can select tools individually by their little icons. You can also use the command area up here where you can actually put the command in. So you can put in the word move, the tool will come up and it'll guide you through the steps to move. It'll say select your object, move, pick the object, move it to where you want to locate it, and you can move copies and things like that. So you can use the command and you can use the tools. I try to do a little bit of both. I'm trying to learn some of the icons. That's very similar to how I used to work, and then the commands are also very helpful. So it'll just take a while for you to get a feeling for how you like to work. Let's see. This gray area here they call the control plane. So it's abbreviated C plane. It's this grid that sits here in space, and we can control how that grid is laid out. So I'm going to go back up to this where it says perspective, this blue area. These are commands that are going to directly affect this viewport. So if I click on the arrow, all these options will come up. And down here, it'll say set C-plane. So to start with, there's lots of things we can do that. But to start with, let's look at these, top, right, and front. These you will probably use quite often. So if I go to set C-plane, right now it is on front. I'm going to go to top and you'll see how it changes. I'm going to go top. It now lays it down on the bottom like a floor or maybe like a tabletop. This directly relates to some of the tools and how you're working because sometimes it'll work off of the C-plane, like extrusion and things like that. So it'll build off of that. So this is top and you have front and then you have right. So you can flip it up and it'll be right or left, depending on how you're looking at your object. And that can guide you on how you build. So I'm just going to talk about units. Um, I am working in inches because, the materials and everything, in the United States, we haven't converted to metric. I'm not trying to convert you to inches at all. Metric is definitely a far better system. but I just use inches because I can relate to that. 'Cause I can estimate very well in inches about how things are in the beginning before we know exactly how things are. We're going to kind of estimate, and this grid will help you. Like you don't want to start building like a little bottle and then have it 20 feet tall because the grid is out of scale and you're not in proportion. I mean, you can and then shrink it down, but it's always a good idea to try to work within a proportion and a scale that you can relate to. So let's talk about that, setting that up. So if we go into File all the way at the top here at the left, and we're going to go into the Properties. And if you select on Properties, there will be a selection right here called Units. So if you select Units, right here you can put in what you want. So you can see I have inches, and I have my tolerance at 0.001, which is pretty tight. And I'm going to do decimal, how that is going to be organized. So you can put in whatever you want in here, whatever you feel comfortable working in. Let's get rid of that. So that sets up what that's going to look like. So I have it set up that each one of these little squares is a quarter of an inch. So I know that four of them is an inch. They do have a grid here. They have a dark grid and a light grid, but it's extremely subtle. So this is the dark grid here, which designates my inch. And these are the quarter inches, which is a lighter grid. It's a little hard to see. And I set up with a white background and I have a grid and I have my selection color. When I select something, I have it on an orange. This works well for me. I think initially when you open up Rhino, it might have a gray background, and I believe the selection color is a yellow. So the yellow works nicely on the gray because it stands up. But for me, the yellow was too pale on the white. So I just adjusted that. So when you get into it, if you're uncomfortable with how it's laid out, I can show you how to set that up, and that would be in the properties. So that's the grid and setting that up. So I'm going to talk about some of the building tools, the initial building tools. Rhino sets it up where we have three categories. We have curves, surfaces, and solids. Curves means any kind of a line, like this line that's curved. That's pretty obvious. That's a curve. But they also call straight lines, like this one way over here on the left. That is also called a curve. So that's a little confusing, but all lines of any kind are in the curve tools. And that's one of the toolbars that we have set up here at the top. And then we have surfaces. Surfaces usually are set up with iso lines, these lighter lines in the middle on this one and on this curved shape. That's visually giving us a clue that that is a surface and it's not a two-dimensional, it's not just a polyline connected. And I'll show you what the difference is between those. So quite often they'll do that. A solid initially does not have iso lines on it until we turn it into surfaces. And some more complex solid objects will have iso lines. And I'll show you how that works also. So those are the three building categories that we're going to talk about. So over here, I'm going to go to front view. So I'm going to go to my set view, and I'm going to go to front. And I'm just going to navigate over here, and we can talk about some of these tools. So curve tools are up here where it's called, let's see, solid. Where's my curve creation? Curve drawing. So here's the part where you just draw tools, and they have a curve, which is other subsequent tools that you can use. And then you can also use curve tools. So once you draw the curve from curve drawing, you can go to curve tools and do things to those lines. They're trying to organize it into these categories because it's overwhelming all the options that they have. So they're trying to break it down into groupings until you figure out how to do that. So I'm going to go into curve drawing. And here's all the tools that we can draw. It also has some of these standard tools about explode and trim and split and move and the arrow, which I have down here in the sidebar. So there's lots of different ways to get to these tools. So in here, I'm just going to go to drawing. So if I select this one little line right here, it's a single line. I'm not going to do any snapping to any objects. I'm just going to click in space anywhere I want. And since I don't have orthographic snap on, I'm just going to draw it and I can stop. And there's my line. This continuous line can be beneficial if you want to draw a continuous line. So I can click, click, and I can keep going back and forth. And when I get to a point where I like it, say I like this line here, I click, and then I right click and it ends. And now I have this line that's made out of several segments. So that's just drawing a straight line without any kind of snap detail. There are a lot of curve drawing tools in here, so I'm just going to demonstrate one. You have to experiment with them and see how they work. Some of them are very strict geometry. You can do ovals and rectangles and a whole series of different things. So let's just pick one of the curve tools. I'm going to use control point curve. And this is very similar to vector artwork in Illustrator. You'll see the similarities to that. So I'm going to click down here, click over here, and then when I drag over, I'm starting to get my curve. So I can estimate because it's very hard to be very specific about how you're going to do this, but you can kind of get an idea of what kind of a curve you might want to draw. When I get to the point where I like it, I'm going to right click, and now I have that. But let's say it's not perfect. It doesn't do exactly what I want to do. So if you click on it, you'll have these control points will come up. And now we can move them and manipulate those. So I can grab this one right here and I can pull this in. Let's say I want this point a little higher. I can move this around and turn this into a curve that I like. And that's how I made this curve over here by just manipulating some of those things. So that will take a little practice and you can experiment with that. And there are several tools that do these kinds of things. So I'm going to get rid of that. So we can also go and do some simple geometry. So I'm going to do a rectangle here. And I'm going to show you the difference between this rectangle and a surface. So this is now a rectangle that I drew. So it's an outline. And I can put in numbers. If I knew specifically the numbers, how wide and how high that is, you can designate that, or you can just sort of wing it if you're just sort of experimenting with shapes. So you can see how this does not have witness lines in it, these little lines in here, because it's just a poly surface. So I'm going to talk about, I'm going to jump just a little bit here. So if you're not sure what it is and you click on that, you can go to this properties window that we brought in, that colorful circle. If you click on that, this is all the stuff about that object. But the most important one right now is it's called what type of object. That's a closed curve. It's a curve that's connected and it's closed. So you can do certain things with that closed curve. I'm going to come over here to this curve here, and if we look at the properties, that's an open curve. So that's sort of obvious. It's just one line and it's not closed. This one is closed and it's different than this one right here. And I'm going to go into some other views so we can see what these things will look like. So if I go back up here to this little blue area in this window, let's change the view. Let's go to set view. I'm just going to go to perspective so we can see these objects. Right now in here, we're in wireframe. There's shaded, render, ghosted, X-ray. There's a whole series, and you can experiment with these. Just click on them, and you'll see what that looks like. Right now, I'm just going to review wireframe and shaded. So I'll go to shaded, and it makes these gray, these objects. Now, these are gray, and these are not, because these are lines and curves. That's a closed curve, like we know, and this is an open curve. This is a surface that had those ISO lines on it. So now that I'm in shaded, the ISO lines are not apparent at this point, but it shows me that it's shaded. So that is a surface, and we know that. And then we have this surface here. And then this is a 3D solid, which I'll review in a minute. So what I did was I took these curves right here. I drew them. I just copied that over, drew these straight lines. Let's just go to the front view and we'll talk about that. So let's say I want this surface that I have right here. So I drew these curves first to create that. So I can take these curves and turn that into a surface. So what I can do is there's a tool for that. So if I go into um, surface tools, not surface creation, and I have a tool over here. I'm in the wrong window. So I need surface creation. Sorry, wrong window. And we have one over here called, see, this is, I'm looking at the little icons. I'm getting familiar with how they work. You can also put in, surface creation or whatever this one's called. This one's called surface from 2, 3, or 4 edges. So you can type all that in, but I'm trying to learn the different icons. So this one looks like this kind of wiggly little square here. So what we can do is, I'm going to select the curves first. So that means I have to select, and I'm going to shift to select multiple objects. This goes into the whole selection area. So that's just shift, holding that down and selecting. Like that's very similar to Illustrator. To deselect, what we do is you just hold down Control, and I can deselect the line if I clicked on the wrong one. But in this case, I want to select that line, so I'm going to select that. So I have all these selected. This intersection It doesn't have to absolutely line up to use this tool. It just has to overlap, and the tool will automatically create that for me. So I'm going to click on this tool, surface from 2, 3, or 4. It's going to click and automatically created that surface from those tools. So that's one way of building surfaces from lines. And we can take surfaces and build solids. So everything relates to one another. And we can go back and forth in between all those different kinds of tools. So let's do that. And that's how you create a surface from lines. Let's see, curves, surfaces. Mhm. We can take surfaces, like I mentioned, we connect them. I'm not going to get too involved with building techniques right now. I just want you to get a feeling for the different terminology and the different kinds of objects that we can create. So we can also create solids. So I'm going to go into perspective here, and we have these solids. These solids are built with the solid tool. I could take this surface over here and manipulate it in space and connect them together, and I could join them and build that object at the same time. But sometimes if you know you need a geometric solid like a cuboid like this or a cylinder, you can go right to your solid tools. So we have the solid tools up here, and some of these are pretty straightforward. Is this the right? No, I need solid creation. So here's creation and solid tools. So creation, here's our basic geometries. So I'm going to click on this cube. Here's where this C-plane will come into view here, and you'll see how this works. So I'm going to create a cuboid. So the first thing you do is, and this will happen on the C plane. I'm going to do left and right. I could put numbers in if I want, and I'm going to click. And the third option is how long it is. So you can see how it's building off of that grid, off of the C plane. I can also put another number in here and I click, and it has now created that as a solid. And if we look over here at the top, under our properties, it says closed extrusion. So that closed extrusion is the same as a solid. It's another way of letting us know what we did and how we built it. So that is a closed solid surface. And I'll show you a little bit about how that works down the road here. So we can change the C-plane and build in the other direction if we know how it's going to work. So if we go to set C-plane, and this time I'm going to go to top. So now you can see it's like laying on the floor or a counter. And I use that exact same tool over here. And I'm going to click, and I can put my numbers in, and I'm creating this surface. And then I'm going up and I'm sort of extruding off of that plane. Same tool, but working off the C-plane in a different axis. Same thing with the cylinder. You just click on the cylinder tool and it will work off of that plane. So I just took these two objects. Once you make these, you can start to do things with solid tools. And some of the simple ones to do right away are called Boolean operations. That's where we can take two objects, we can connect them, or we can separate one of the objects from the other object, depending on what order we do in. We can create objects that is a result of the intersection of those two, and we can do other manipulations. I'm just going to show two right now just so we can get started. So this will be, I built my solids, I moved them into position. So now we're going to go to solid tools and not necessarily solid creation. And the first ones here, these little spherical shapes, and those are the Boolean operations. So it's Boolean union and Boolean difference. And I will show you how those two work. So let's go to Boolean union. And here's where the commands will come into place here. It's very helpful. Select surfaces or polysurfaces to union. So I can select, right now I don't have to hold shift because I have the tool selected first. It knows I'm going to select several things. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to click here. I don't have shift on it. I'm just going to enter. And it now has connected those. One of the telltale signs is now this black edge is in here. And if I select this and I click on this object, I now have one object out of those two. And this has an ISO line on it here, but the cube doesn't. So if we go back into line drawing or wire, I'm sorry, wire, you can see it has ISO lines all over it, these center light little lines, which is also that message that's telling us that we have an object there. It's solid. So it looks like all the surfaces put together. So it's a little bit of a designation as you build and manipulate things. The ISO lines may appear sometimes. This is just a plain extrusion, so it's not going to show up at that point. So let me just undo that. And you can see how the parts came apart inside. So let's undo. So now I'm back to these two objects. So another one that's very convenient is you can do difference. So bowling difference, now we have to select it in order. Select surfaces of polysurface I want to subtract from. So I'm going to select the cuboid. I'm going to enter, and then the command says pick the one you want to subtract from that, and you select that and you do enter. And now that has disappeared, and I have created this little partial curve in the corner. Let's say that's what I wanted to have. And if I go into shaded, it will show us how that works. And there it is, separated. So that's the beginning of manipulating some solids. There are lots of tools here to play with, but I don't want to go too deep in everything at this point. So I'm just going to undo that so we have that ready for class. Okay. Snaps are very important. I talked about having our snap tools up. That's one thing that'll be for on snap. There are a couple of other ones down here that are very good. So there's snap to grid. That's pretty obvious. That's this grid that we have down here on the floor. If I wanted to, I'm going to have snap to grid on. Let's say I go to my, let's go to, where's my curve drawing? And I'm going to just select my line for this point. You can see it is snapping to every one of these grids here. So let's say I know that I want that there. I'm going to snap to grid, and it's just sort of randomly going over the place like this. I'm going to talk about ortho snap right now next to that. So I can have snap to grid, which does that. And you can see the line is just going wherever it goes. Ortho means it goes perpendicular to the C plane, and it'll go straight up, straight down, left or right. Perpendicular is like 90 degrees from itself. And I'll show you what that means. That's a little confusing description. So I'm going to go back to my line tool. I'm going to have grid snap, which we saw. It's going to snap. So what if I know I want this line to go perpendicular to the C plane? I can turn on ortho and I can snap, and it will automatically see the guidelines automatically forcing it straight up. Or I can go straight down, or to the left, to the right, and front and back. But it's absolutely snap. Now I'm snapping to the grid also, but this is also snapping perpendicular. So we can organize that geometry by using these tools. You can do ortho by itself. So let me just click that tool. I can turn grid snap off so I can draw my line anywhere I want, but it'll still help me organize it from an orthographic point of view. So I didn't snap to the grid, but I am just making my line and guiding to my guideline. I'm clicking. So now I know that line is anywhere in space, but I know it's straight up. And these tools can work in the front view, top view, and side view. I happen to be working in perspective right now. So those are very handy. Planar is very good. I don't use it as much. We'll talk about that at a later point. Another part that a tool that's extremely important is the on snap. Because that once you start building, you're going to want to derive and snap from other pieces of geometry that you have made. So we have on snap. I'm going to turn ortho off for right now. So when I have on snap on, that's these tools. So you can see if I deselect that, all those tools over on the left, they're gray. So they're inactive at this point. So if I select on snap on, I can snap to a variety of different things, and I can control that right here. So if I select the end of something, so I'm going to go back to my tool, the end or corner would be this little piece right in here. And I have end on, and I have end snap on snap. So I could select the end of that line, and it's coming down here, and I can select that. Or let's say I want to select the click to the end of this little line over here. It will select that, and it'll tell me the end. Oh, it's projecting right now. I'm sorry, I have something on. I have projecting on, and I have vertex, and I have quad. Sorry about that. So most of the time, you're going to be using these ones at the top. That's why this was snapping in the wrong location. So let's just get rid of those. And I'll just demonstrate that again without those on. So now I'm going to go back to my line tool. And here and it tells me end or intersection. At the end there, I'm clicking on that. And let's say that's where I want that to go. And I can do that onto a line here also. Now I have point is very similar, point and end. Then there's center. So this line automatically has a center. So it can tell me, and if I have it center on, I'm going to turn near off. I'll talk about near in a second. If I come here in the middle, it should tell me where the center of that is because oh, midpoint. I want midpoint. They call it midpoint, not center. So there's mid, and it said I'm clicking to the midpoint of that. So that's a very important distinction also. So let's get rid of these. Center refers to a geometric shape, like a surface, like these parts on here. So I'm going to do that. That'll be center. This is a little interesting. It's a little different than I'm used to. So I'm going to select my tool. No, I'm going to pick the line tool. I want to draw a line from the center of this thing here. I used to hover in my old software in the middle and it would kind of find the center. Here you need to click the parameters, the outline of the part you want the center of. So if I click this end piece here, that white line comes up and there's a little white square in the middle. And I stay here and I click, it now is putting this line in the center of that square surface. Same thing would happen on any kind of, it could be a hexagon, any kind of a triangle, whatever you want. Same thing happens here with the circle. I'm clicking to the center of that circle by clicking on the parameters of that shape. So that's snapping to center. Near is an interesting one. Like we talked about, I'm going to put near on now. So let's say we have this curved line. I can select to the end of the curve, tells me end. It will also tell me, forget near, mid. See, it says mid there in that little white dialog box. So what if I want to click somewhere over here that isn't a midpoint, isn't an endpoint, there's nothing really there. If I go to near, it will know, it's kind of literally saying whatever I'm near to, it will snap. And it'll say near. So I know that that's near and that's not a midpoint. So that can be handy when you want to when you want to snap to something that isn't a designation in there. So that's very good. You know, perpendicular and tangent, those are also very good. And we'll talk about those later. So that's the snap tools. So we have grid snap, ortho, and on snap. Smart Track is a whole nother series of things. There's a popular tool down here called Gumball. I clicked on Gumball and I'm going to, oops, I got my tool on. I'm going to select the cylinder. That Gumball comes up and I can do a lot of these moving, twisting, and rotating right with the Gumball. For some reason, I don't use this. It's a great tool. Most people do use it. It's extremely handy. I tend to go the long way. Like I'll look at this object and I'll click on it from the front view and I'll rotate it 90 degrees instead of trying to do it with this tool here. Just for some reason, it just works better for me. So you can experiment with that. Again, there are many tutorials on how to use a lot of these tools that are much more concise than what I'm going through here. I'm going over a lot of information quickly, so I want everybody to get up to speed so we can start doing some building in class. So Gumball is something that's quite interesting that you can use. Let's see, snaps, selection, lasso selection. I just want to go over this quickly. It's very similar to Illustrator where you kind of encapsulate things and you select them. So I'm going to select my cursor here, and I'm going to click over here, and I'm going to click from left to right, and I'm going to select these objects right here. I am fully encapsulating them. I am wrapping all the way around them, and they are now selected. If I do something like this, where I'm only halfway over that surface, it will not select that surface and it'll only select the ones that I have completely encapsulated. So that's a lasso from left to right. If you go from right to left, it's a different function. I can do the same thing. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to select these and it looks no dumb, fully encapsulating and I've selected them. Same thing. But if I do it the other way, where I have not entirely encapsulated that surface, and I go like this, it will select it anyhow. So that's a little nuance. Just because I'm hovering over it, it will select that. Now, when you have very complicated shapes and you're trying to select very particular objects inside, you can individually select them. But if you use your lasso to grab many little objects, you can keep that in mind. It can be helpful or it can be a hindrance. So you have to keep track of how that's going to work. So that's doing the lasso selection. I got snaps. Get into properties. Okay, I just have a list here I'm going through. So I'm going to quickly talk about layers. this layer cake here thing. I'm going to go back to that. I have all of this set up. So when you first open this, it'll probably only have three or four and have some numbers on it. But you can add many different selections on here. This can be helpful when you're building, if you're doing a lot of geometry on one layer and it gets kind of complicated and you build from it and you create something. You can take that object and move it forward onto another layer and keep it in the exact same location. That can be beneficial if you want to go back and rebuild and move things and move forward. You can build on many layers and keep track of that, especially when you start changing things, or if you want to do some things in several colors, or you want to try out some geometry changes. You could say, object variation one, and you can move that to another layer. So that can be beneficial. So if you come down here at the bottom, I'm going to right click. It says new layer. So I have layer one selected here. Let's say I want to take that cylinder and I want to move it to that layer. Right now, this is in dark and I have the check and I have the blue up here at the top. That's where that cylinder is right now. When I have that checked and the whole thing is in blue, that is the active layer. Down here, you can see I've created this layer. This little light bulb is on. It's in yellow. That means that it is visible, but not active. And I'll show you what that means. I want to take that cylinder. I want to move it to layer one. So I have to click on layer one, make it blue, and also click again and get the check mark down here. So it's blue with the check mark, and that means it's the current active layer. The light bulb is still on up here where I have curved surfaces and solids. So that's the layer we are seeing. If I turn off the light bulb, there's nothing on layer one at the bottom because everything is on this one here. So now I've clicked the light bulb, but the blue bar came back up here. So now I want to go back down here to layer one, make sure that's blue and the check mark is selected. I can select the cylinder. What I want to do is I'm going to move it to layer one because it's the active layer. So if you go up to the tools up here, there's two ways to do this. You can change object layer or copy object layer. So it's kind of obvious. If I click on copy object layer, it'll copy that cylinder and move it over. I'm going to do change so we can take a look at that. So I'm going to click on change. And when you do that, you don't see anything. Nothing really happens because I have everything active. So if I want to make sure that I got that down here, I can deselect this light bulb, turn that off on the curves layer. And now that cylinder is on layer one. So if I go back to this curves layer, make that my active layer, and turn off the light bulb on layer one, you see how the cylinder is gone. So that's moving things around on different layers. And you can do that as a copy also. So I'm just going to bring that layer back in so we can see that. So that's working with layers. Um, got that. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about material and color, and then I'll wind this up, and then we'll proceed into the other tutorials later on. So right now we have, this is all in gray. So to see, I can make my shaded layer see colors. You're allowed to do that. I leave it gray so I don't get confused with some of the other tools. So when I'm in shaded mode, everything is gray for me. So I'm looking just at objects and not color. If you go to, where are we? Rendered. It has this other look, which is actually quite nice. We can see that big square thing is a light up on the top. I'll talk about lighting later. So now we can see our objects, and our three-dimensional objects, our solids and things like that, don't have any line designations around it, but our lines are lines. So we can see those. We can color these objects. I'm going to quickly just talk about color and materiality on a simple level so you can get a feel for it. There's a couple of, again, there's several ways to do this. What I like right now is I go into my, do I even have it up here? Render tools up here in the gray bar. So if you click on your render tools, all of these options come up. There's a lot going on here. So let's just focus on this little paint tube because that's where we can create colors and materials. So if you click on the paint tube, this dialog box comes up. I have a lot of colors that I've created already. When this first comes up, it'll probably be empty. It might just have one that's white. You can go in there and change that or leave that as a default. So if you want to create a new one, you just right click here and say create new. And there's a lot of things you can do here also. So let's just keep this simple. So if you do create new, come over here And let's pick some of these materials first. They have plastic, plaster, forget about picture, physically based is a more customization, they have paint, metal, and glass. So some of the simple ones initially would be like plastic and paint. So let's just go to paint. So now I have that little white cylindrical piece that came up and it is white. This little dialog box is here ready to go. And it's like paint material. So it says paint. I can go in here and I can even change the material here. If I made a mistake and I didn't want to use paint, or I can just leave that. Paint has one option. It's kind of shiny or it's matte, and you can change the color. So if you click in this bar here where the color is, the color wheel will come up. And I can also go to RGB and CMYK. If I know numbers, I can put the numbers right in and get that exact color. So you can look at color in many different ways. So if we just use the color wheel and just sort of experimenting, I'm coming into this red area. I kind of want like a medium red, and I might want to go back to the wheel and do some kind of a magenta looking thing. I can manipulate this. I can go back up here. Let's say I want it a lot brighter. I can go over here and it'll show me what that new color is. And then I can say, okay. So here is this new color I just created. There's a couple ways to put that on. I can, I think, left click. I drag this over. So my cursor just turned white and it has that little square next to it. That means I am dragging that and I'm going to put it over this color and I'm going to release and it made it that color. There are other ways to do this. I can make, so let's say I have other colors. I'm going to select this cuboid first. I'm going to go, let's say I go to the green up here. I'm going to click on that green. I'm going to right click on the green little circle. It's assigned to object. So if I click that, it will make that green. So that green is a little bit shiny. So you can see that little shine on the top there and it reflects as I'm moving it around. I think this might be shiny also. Yeah, that's a little bit shiny. But then I can play with the reflectivity down here and say this magenta. I don't like it shiny, so I can take it from gloss and put it all the way down to matte. And now you can see that doesn't have a shine anymore. If I deselect that, it's more of a matte finish. All right, that's the basics with just selecting color and putting some reflectivity and materials on that. All right, so I'm going to stop this tutorial now and we'll continue that. So I'm gonna, everybody will have this Rhino file. You can open that up and I'll go through this list in class to get us started.